We need to go out of our way as companies, as entrepreneurs, as startups themselves, to buy from other entrepreneurs. So some of the responsibility for making this area successful falls to the startups themselves and building an environment that's more friendly for startups to get funded, for startups to hire people that have done it before, and part of that is buying from other startups.
Welcome to Triangle Tweener Talks, a weekly podcast by builders for builders where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from the Triangle region of North Carolina. Now here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the Triangle Tweener Fund, Scott Wingo.
Welcome to part 2 of a 2-part series where we interview Pendo co-founder Eric Boduch. If you haven't listened to part 1, you should go ahead and go back and check that out. These are going to be better if you listen to them in sequence. When we left off, Eric had left Pendo and decided to take his knowledge to a venture studio. But you may be wondering, what is a venture studio? How does it work? How do you take these ideas and spin companies out? How is it different than an accelerator, an incubator, a venture capital firm? We'll go into all that. This episode is sponsored by Whitley Recruiting Partners. Whitley Recruiting Partners specializes in recruiting top tech talent for growth stage startups in the Triangle. They offer industry-specific entrepreneurial employees who drive immediate results through fast, accurate, and scalable recruiting process. If you have an opening, they have an offering for Triangle Tweener Times subscribers where they will do a survey of available talent for that opening. Extensus HR. They are a PEO, which means they help you manage all of your HR needs. That enables tech founders and growing businesses to scale smarter. They take all the HR admin away off your plate. They manage the payroll, do the recruiting, employee benefits, retirement plans, compliance, risk, and more, so entrepreneurs can focus on innovation. For over 25 years, they've leveraged a people-first approach, customer-centric mindset, and deep industry experience to ensure employees have the tools needed to stay competitive in today's market and employers. Robinson Bradshaw, full-service business law firm with a passion for supporting the Triangle's startup ecosystem. Learn more about Robinson Bradshaw's startup and venture capital practice at robinsonbradshaw.com. B of A, Bank of America's transformative technology group, helps game-changing tech businesses and their founders realize their boldest ambitions across a wide range of technology sectors. With hands-on support, world-class resources, and an extensive network, B of A provides the stability and scalability that tech companies need to rapidly grow today and into the future. Lithios Apps. Lithios is a Triangle-based software design and development studio that builds custom mobile and web applications focused on quality and user experience. Lithios helps founders and teams bring products to life that drive growth, engage customers, and stand out in competitive markets. They've worked side by side with clients whose products have gone on to earn millions in follow-on funding. Aligned Technology Group, ATG. Are you navigating cloud costs as a startup? Who isn't? ATG helps you maximize AWS Activate credits, where you can get up to $100,000 in free cloud credits. This is facts. We actually have some of these at one of my companies, and $300,000 for AI-driven startup businesses. As an AWS Advanced Tier partner, they streamline your cloud journey, optimize your security, help you with scalability, all cost efficiently. Startups move fast. Aligned Technology Group helps you build smarter. Unlock your AWS credits today by calling Aligned Technology Group. Eisner Amper, formerly HPG, one of the world's largest business consulting firms. They have a dedicated technology practice offering outsourcing, accounting, tax, and advisory services. Their experienced professionals serve more than 2,000 technology companies, from early-stage startups to public enterprises. Discover how Eisner Amper's stage-specific solutions and industry expertise can help you achieve your milestones, whether startup, international expansion, M&A, or IPO. EisnerAmper.com/tech. And last but not least, thanks to our friends at Walk West who produced this podcast. We really appreciate it. We are back with Eric Boduch. If you haven't listened to part 1, you may want to go and do that now because these are very sequential conversations. And when we left off, Eric had left Pendo and decided to take his knowledge to a venture studio. But you may be wondering, what is a venture studio? Well, let's jump into the conversation and find out.
So now, I guess, answering what is a venture studio. I think there's different kinds of venture studios. It's all about a different way to start companies, and to some extent, a different way to fund companies in the early going. Different models for how you can do it. different derivations of it. We could spend a whole hour and a half.
Did you
on
go
different
study all
models.
this and kind of come up with what you
I did. I looked through a lot of it and came up with a model that I think worked, and then started down that path and made some tweaks to the model as we did it. As you learn things, from talking to, in large part, the tweaks were on the make it better for investors or a certain class of investors. But so the idea behind a venture studio is co-creating companies with entrepreneurs. So how can you do parallel entrepreneurship or multiple companies at a time? And then I think the model comes down to like, how many companies do you do? How much ownership does the venture studio take? Do they charge anything for the services? Which the answer should be no, in my humble opinion. How
I hate
big's
these
the
models where
team?
you give a company money.
So there's a lot of things I think.
Back.
There's a bunch of models that can work, but I think it fundamentally comes down to like, how involved are you? How much effort do you put into starting companies, both as an individual, as a leader of the venture studio, and also as a team member of the venture studio, and coupled with, what does that mean as far as your equity? How many companies can you do at a time? There's a bunch of variables in there you have to think through.
Yep.
So
back at 30,000 feet, there's incubators. No one says that anymore. Now I think everyone says accelerator.
yeah, incubators, accelerators.
Yeah, there's traditional VC, and then they're starting your own company, and you chose this fourth option, which is venture studio.
Yeah.
Was this because you really didn't want to just work with a cohort of people? You had a bunch of ideas you wanted to spawn forward?
Well, let's walk through that a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's start with like the easier ones to eliminate. It's probably easier for me to eliminate the incubator accelerator from the standpoint of like, you're doing so many companies, you kind of run office hours, you help them out, you might do meetings and give them oversight, but you don't really know it's hard to give really good advice specific to a company, right? So you're giving general advice, right? And you're just not, you can't be hands-on just because of necessity. I mean, there's no way you can be hands-on with 10, 20, albeit, 100 or 200 companies that are running through a cohort, and you keep running those cohorts, right? So that wasn't for me. I think those models are great, right? I mean, obviously YC has proven that model to be amazing. It just wasn't something that at this point in my life I wanted to do, or I might be more apt to do that 20 years from now or 10 years from now or 15, where I want to be maybe less hands-on. So that one just wasn't a fit for me and not something I wanted to do personally at that point in my life. And still, the VC was more of like, hey, you write a check, you're you're investing in companies, and you can give them oversight and sit on the board. Maybe you're not on the board. Maybe you write a check and that's it. And that also wasn't as interesting because I really still wanted to be involved in the build process. So then that left kind of two options: start another company. I love the early stage stuff. Do it once. Start a company. I think Jason Kaplane still would love me to do that. So he can be at my door. And it's intriguing. And I was talking to another partner at a big studio, and he's like, hey, I might even go back and do that someday if the right idea comes along. And I can see that. I could see that for myself too at some point. So that was intriguing. But the venture studio thing, I felt like now I had the background and the credibility to do it. And so started thinking about, well, what if we do 2 companies a year, right? Where I'll work hands-on with entrepreneur, we'll build a team. Right now we have a team of 6, right, that are working with those companies, and then help them get started. You can think of us as the unpaid co-founder, right? We're taking equity. We're not taking a salary like most of the other co-founders are. We're completely in it with, only getting paid when there's an exit, a liquidity event, right?
Yeah. So it seems like you didn't want to be hands off. You didn't want to be so hands on that you were the total founder. You want to do multiple companies, but you also didn't want to do this accelerator, which is kind of like it's closer to the companies,
but not hands-on. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting.
So that was the studio model kind of fit where I could help entrepreneurs build companies. I could be their partner. I could build a team around me. And there's a lot of benefits to the model. Like the studies in the model say, studio companies grow faster. They get to Series A faster. They get external funding in general faster. They're more likely not to die. They're more likely to have better exits. All of the data says this is a great way to do things. And we can, as a studio, I think if it's done right, and we're a build-oriented studio, we help companies, build that first product. We help them raise money. We're now kicking off a venture fund. We want to write that first check, or at least half that first check, into companies. So like, get that first $1 million in, when it's still at the, post idea stage, but not yet product stage, right? So we'll be doing that as a new offering through the studio, a second offering outside of the core studio. But I think the idea is, can we help people create companies in a better way than you might get through, friends and family and angel networks, and bridge that gap between idea and real institutional money?
Yeah. So. And then I remember, I think it's the first one was Bill Gross at Idea Lab.
Yeah.
And his company, one of his companies bought my second company. Yeah, so I actually got to go out there, and it's pretty wild because it was an homage to his ego, right? So he sat in the middle on an elevated platform, and hanging behind him in an open space was a giant portrait of himself.
That's pretty funny.
And then he would actually explain it on the tour that ideas would radiate from him outwards. It sounds like you have a little bit more of an open kind of a system here.
I hope. I've met Bill once somewhere, and frankly don't remember. This is a long time ago. Don't remember the conversation that well. I guess that's what.
But they spawned. To his credit, he spawned GoTo.com, which was basically the invented paid search, Expedia, City Search. There's probably something I'm forgetting.
They did a bunch of great stuff.
Yeah, they did a lot of great.
Yeah.
He had,
and they
earned his spot in the middle of that room. I mean, he had some really darn good ideas.
Absolutely. Hopefully I stay a little more humble than that. But
the point of my question: how many of these ideas come from Eric's brain, and how many of them are founders coming to you in the studio and saying, "Hey, I really like this concept, and I'm a first-time founder, and I think I've got a great idea. I want a partner. I want you to be my co-founder," basically, to the studio.
Let's talk through that. It's an interesting exercise. Our first studio company was Revcast. In essence, the idea behind Revcast started as hey, we're going to help people manage quota capacity. At the time, we were still at the tail end of the go-go days, where everything was about, if we manage how much quota we have on the street, that's what's going to drive sales. Because everyone was buying software.
No one kind of felt like it came out of Pendo, your experience.
It did. It came out of work I was doing at Adopt, and when I was building out the first model, and then realizing that all of the planning side of the business, how you run and manage your revenue organization, at least outside of forecasting in the quarter, outside of running deals, really running your revenue organization is all run through spreadsheets. And it felt like it should be more like manufacturing and SAP. And I think in general, things are moving there. It's not quite there yet. You got great guys like Sam Jacobs over at Pavilion that are talking about that all the time. There's a bunch of people that are pushing salespeople to be not deal people, but process organization, almost math people, right? You build a model, you execute against your playbook and your process, and then you should be able to adapt to changing market conditions. It should look a lot more like resource management. It's inevitable sales is going to be there, and Revcast is early in that kind of space.
That was an Eric idea?
So that was an idea that came out of Pendo. It was an Eric idea. It was refined by talking with a bunch of revenue operations people. But then we ran into a huge macroeconomic shift, right? Interest rates went up. Money wasn't free anymore. And so I would say that which started at quota capacity now became a revenue optimization problem. Hey, if you have $1 to spend on your revenue organization, or say you have $10 million to spend on a revenue organization, what should it look like? Right? How many quota carriers do you need? How many people do you need generating pipeline? How much pipeline's coming from marketing? What's that all costing you? What's your expectations on, things like attainment? How long is it going to take to ramp new people? How are you allocating for people that go out on maternity and paternity? There's a whole optimization problem, just like you'd have in a manufacturing environment. Yeah. And that's what Revcast turned into, right? It's much, much bigger products. So we all of a sudden went from, hey, we're going to sell this is our wedge, to eventually getting there, to holy shit. But it was a holy shit moment of all of a sudden it was okay, we had this thing that the RevOps people said they love, but now as we're actually bringing it out to market, and it wasn't that long for us to build it, now as we're pushing it out to market, all of our beta customers are oh, we don't have money, and we have even less money for sales stack, because people think we've overinvested, and my CFO's telling me to get rid of tools, and you're net new, right? You're not even replacing spend, right? So it became okay, we need to expand, we need to change our offering. And then it became like, instead of doing quota capacity, right, it became that plus all of this other stuff, which is where we've finally are pretty close to there today. So it's like, hey, we can actually help you run an efficient revenue organization. We can help you understand as a CFO, like where every dollar is being spent, why it's spent, where your risks are, what your assumptions are. So you can be a lot more confident going to the board and saying, these are my numbers and this is why we're going to hit them. And here's the risks we see. And here's how it compared to our metrics from last year. And as long as we hit this number, this is what we'll do. If we can improve it 20%, this is what we can do. Like a much more intelligent conversation, I think, with boards.
Yeah. I'm currently growing at 20%. If you want me to grow 40.
Yeah. This is what it's going to cost. This is what I need to do. These are the improvements I'm going to need to get. Like, with my existing team, last year we did 80% attainment. We'd have to hit 90 in order to grow 20, that kind of stuff, right? Being able to have those intelligent conversations between board, between CEO, between CFO, between VP of sales.
Is it hard?
That's where it started.
A lot of founders that try to get people out of spreadsheets, they find there's this like recidivism back to the spreadsheet. Have you found it's been hard to break people of that kind of building my own spreadsheet?
It's definitely a little bit of a struggle, and people are like, well, it kind of works. And then I'm like, okay, you're not going to miss, they're like, we're confident we're going to hit our number. And you talk to them 3 months later and they're like, yeah, we missed. They're like, why'd you miss? We're not entirely sure. Or they'll say things like deals pushed. That's the worst excuse ever. I'm a board member on a company too. Hate hearing the deals pushed. Well, why did they push? And then you make assumptions some deals
pipeline quality problem. We had to work with our reps to like really clean up the pipeline.
Yeah. And I'm like, all of those things should be part of your model. Right? Like they need to be there, and then you need to adjust things. And we're like, okay, well, if our average deal size is really this, or deal time is this, what does that mean?
Or if every fourth quarter, 25% of the deals pushed, that should be part of the model. It shouldn't be a surprise.
And if they can't come back and answer some of those questions, you question why. But I don't think boards hold them accountable to that in that same way. And it's hard too in the board's defense, right? Your real action is just changing out the people that are in the spots, right?
Yeah.
But I think like systems, especially around sales and revenue, need to change. And so that's the bet with Pendo, is like we can change the way people are doing in running the revenue organization. And I think we'll expand that into things like deal forecasting. There's lots of areas. I mean, you could see this as a basis of what could be the next Salesforce for that matter.
Is Pendo a customer? Not yet.
Not yet.
Gotta grow.
They're a little out of our ICP for Revcast. We look at our ICP as like, Series A up to 150, 200 million is probably our sweet spot. So Pendo's a little bit bigger than that out of our ICP. Though I'd love to get, Jennifer Kalin, who's the CFO over there using it. It'd be great. But they're a little out of our ICP. Eventually, someday.
So that's when you came up with the idea and ran it for a while.
Came up with the idea. A long-winded way of saying it. Yeah. The second company, 2 and 3 happened around the same time, so you could argue either as the second company. But we'll pick Wayfound as the second company. That was an idea that was a big play in AI, right? So we're like looking at this and we're saying, hey, this open AI product's coming out, this Jippity, as I like to call Chat GPT. GPT is too long to say. One of our engineers coined early Jippity, and it caught on for a little while. It seems to go up and down, but it's just a lot easier to say Jippity. I mean, who wants to say GPT all the time? It takes too long. It's too long. Too long. Shorten it.
It is long.
Maybe we can call it G, but it has to be something different. Jippity's kind of funny. Anyways, so Jippity was coming out and we're like, holy shit, there's going to be something amazing coming out of this. We should just start building. And we started building around that space. We originally thought we were going to go after, the AI SDR space, right? Because that's so natural, as a lot of people ended up thinking afterwards. That was a natural space, and we had some really cool tech there. Arguably, we still have some underlying tech there that's probably better than what half the people in that space have. And we were going down that space and building. So that was another idea that kind of came internally more than anything else, right? We were building for that space. And we were building a lot of core infrastructure at that point, because you need to build that core infrastructure to really do, any kind of business function right. And part of that was, how are you analyzing how well the agents do? And we had gotten Tatiana Mahmout, who's had a brief stint at Pendo, and she was also the CPO of Nextdoor, and she worked at AWS as an executive and over Salesforce as an executive. So just amazing background. She was one of my advisors, and I was talking to her about this, and I was like, hey, we're looking for a CEO for this. I had one false start with the guy that was going to run with that I want to run with the AI SDR, take it in that direction. He was interested in it, but ended up not wanting to jump on into the startup world. And so I was talking with Tatiana about it, and she's like, well, what do you think about me running it? What do you think about me taking over and being the CEO? And I said, I think that would be amazing. I think you'd be, an amazing CEO. I mean, great product background, really good for finding the product market fit. Never been a CEO before. Sometimes she rubs people. She drives people, right? So better or worse, you're going to get on board that bus. And as a CEO, you have to do that. So she came on board, and we were trying to figure out how to take that to market. And she ended up really glomming in onto the performance management side of things. Like, how do you manage agents, make sure they're performing up to snuff, and doing it from a business perspective. A lot of people have tried to address that from like, hey, we'll do prompt engineering, we'll do this to work on the engineering side. But frankly, when you're deploying agents, whether it's a test and production, you just have to manage them. You have to make sure they don't go off the rails. You have to make sure they're actually answering questions that the customers are coming up with. You have to do that at scale. You have to have agents, in essence, at that point, you're having agents manage agents with some additional human intervention. So there's a huge market that I think that the sales forces of the world and all the people building heavy into the agent world are starting to realize now, that performance management. So that second company started internally. That's what they're doing. They're in San Francisco. Revcast raised $3 million. Wayfound also raised $3 million as their first round. All San Francisco money in the case of Wayfound, mostly San Francisco money in the case of Revcast. I'm dying to do a deal that's led by someone in Raleigh.
Tweener funds in Revcast. We're a local money.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish if I had known earlier, I would have got you in the Wayfound deal too. But they're all of engineering and products here, but or I say all of engineering's here, but
we'll count it. You're a local anchor, so we'll count it.
So that was company 2. Also an internal idea, but they're also early. So you're kicking off your studio and people don't know to come to you yet, right? The third idea actually came from one of our advisors in the product marketing space. And we looked at first it started as a platform for product managers. And then we quickly looked at, specifically talking and tackling brand story first. So how you tell your story. And again, AI is kicking off. So we're like, hey, we can do things now with AI that we couldn't do before, right? We can listen to all of your external conversations, right? Gong was already doing that for sales calls, but now we can listen to customer service calls. We can listen to marketing pitches. We can listen to everything you'll give us access to. We can look at your email pitches. We can look at your landing pages. We can look at all of this stuff at scale. So how your company is represented externally, we can analyze, and then we can compare it with, going back to things like rubrics, like what is your sales rubric? What's your messaging? What came out of, command of your sale or your sales consulting, right? All of that strategic work you've spent all this money on, marketing and positioning, messaging. Now we can take those documents and we can compare it to what people are actually doing and saying. And so we can identify salespeople that might need to be retrained, right? We can identify marketing materials that are out of date. We can identify customer success people that maybe aren't answering questions, in the right way or representing the brand in the right way. All of that type of stuff can happen at scale that you just couldn't do before. I mean, period. Even the sales side, you could listen to some of the golden calls, but you only could listen to a snippet as a manager, a small portion of them as a manager. And now AI can do that at scale and say and then tie that to business performance, which is great. And the big thing for them is Troop, the company that came out of this, is their claim to fame is we can help you change your win rate, right? We can help you improve your customer satisfaction and your retention, from the customer success and the marketing and the customer marketing side. But on the front end, we can help you improve your win rate, because if you're doing the things you should be doing on all the sales calls, you're likely to convert more deals from the early stage to the later stage and are likely to close more deals. So I think there's a heavy tie-in with win rate.
That's number 3. Is there a number 4?
That's number 3. So that was pseudo externally developed.
So 2 are internal, 1 external.
And then the fourth one is a company called Sesame, which came to us. We were intrigued by the identity space, digital identity. And this guy, James Monahan, came to us with this idea. He's like, hey, we want to do something. I want to do something in the identity space. I've been working for it for 12 years. Here's an idea I have specifically around building a marketplace for identity verification providers.
So this is like OAuth, like B2B identity?
No, we're looking at the consumer side. So like if you sign up for a bank account or you sign up for Masterworks or you sign up for, Otis, anything that you have to have, your identity proven, those are done by IDVs, some large companies that'll say you are who you say you are. They don't exchange information. So wouldn't it be great if there was a marketplace? Because there's a huge drop off. Like as you can imagine, you're like, oh, I'm signing up for a service. Now they're like, go get your license and hold it up to your webcam. And like, how many times do you want to do that? The drop off is pretty high, right? But if you could reuse those scans across competing organizations and verify the people through some, cool tech, that makes a lot of sense. So we built that and are now trying to figure out the market for that, working with some of the IDV providers to run a pilot for that. And the second thing coming out of that is this whole idea of reputation or fraud detection, right? If you have access to more scans, you're going to be able to detect bad actors a lot easier and save people the cost. So that was company 4. That was external. It was an idea that we were intrigued by to begin with. And he came to us with something we were excited about.
Consumer's interesting too.
Yeah. Sorry?
Going in the consumer direction. It's probably got a
we're
B2B.
Selling to businesses, but
B2Bs.
Consumers can understand it, right? And then the 5th company, some of the stuff, like the companies that are incubated right now, 2 of the 3 that we're working on are brought to us. One's in the social selling space. Another one's in the e-com space. And a third one I'm spending a lot of time on myself and will maybe run myself for a while. It's the plan. Is kind of like in the agent space. Yeah. Well, I don't know as much. Well, maybe breaking, but you look at AI and you're like, hey, there's a great opportunity to like make people's lives easy, right? And it was a business idea I had way back in the day before the days of AI. Is like, how do we have computers making our lives easy, and agents can do that. And so I'm looking at that space pretty heavily now. Where we've been building code in that space. At some point, I'll raise money for it. But we're building agent tech that'll help people make their lives a lot easier.
Cool.
So
awesome.
So those are the companies we're working with. I would say, it's a long-winded way of saying like we have ideas that come internally, ideas that come externally. We just want to be involved at the idea level. We're not the studio is not a VC, and even the VC fund we're raising is not a VC that's doing external deals, right? It's there to take advantage of the fact that we have asymmetric information. We're working with the CEO. We're working with the idea for a couple months. So we have an extreme amount of due diligence. So barring us finding something that makes us not want to pursue it, if we're going to pursue it, why don't we also, write that first check-in and take advantage of, early staged valuations and go to a CEO and be like, hey, you don't even have to shop this. We'll give you a deal. It's going to be slightly under market, but you don't have to shop this at all, and so we can write those early checks in companies that we have a ton of information, a lot of asymmetric information about, and can get them at lower price points than the general marketplace. So that's why we're going to do that. Get
them to a bigger seed with more momentum, which is kind of like a theme. That we'll talk about the triangle ecosystem in a second. That's kind of a common.
Yeah. So raising money for that's great.
Yeah. Cool. I found going as an operator where you're like going really deep on a problem and then doing the tweener fund, which is an extreme example of, with 150 portfolio companies.
Yeah.
The variation, the variability, you have to go like super wide and not as deep. If you've found that as well, how do you handle the complexity of basically keeping now 7 companies in your head? You obviously do a good job at it.
Yeah. I mean, we only do 2 a year, and Tatiana and Wayfound, like I'm less involved in at this point, right? So Revcast is a kind of a weird one. A, because I want to get them farther along, and B, because they were the first one, and I was the CEO for the first year of that too, right, as we were getting it kicked off. So like,
they're the kid that went to college and kind of moved back.
Yeah, I mean, they're the kid that was homeschooled to some extent, right? Because I was that CEO and I was involved in, they're kind of like an exception. Troop is getting to that point. We have a CEO, Austin, who's amazing. Had been a CEO in the past for, a company that raised 70 million, so I'm spending a good bit of time with them, but that'll transition to like, it has been Austin's business to run for a while now. We raised friends and family $500,000 for that. We're going to go out and raise VC for that. So I'm super excited about that business. I mean, that's one that like feels a lot like the Pendo business. There's so much upside, and it's such an interesting space, and it's a whole new opportunity in an area that product marketing has existed, but maybe like product management hasn't been understood as important as it is. When you think about like companies like Salesforce, why were they successful? A lot of it had to do with the brand story, the story they told, like that no software story.
Genius.
It was fucking genius, right? Like, and that drove the business, right? And everyone started thinking about that, and you start thinking about like their competitor at the time was Siebel, right? And it was like a huge difference when you thought about, the implementation time and the time to get up and running, and, the Benioff messaging there was great, right? And there's lots of stories like that. And so like brand story, consistency of brand story, and how that relates to sales and marketing are so important. And product marketing has never had software for them. So like Troop delivers that, like real software for product marketers, or, that product marketing sales enablement piece of the business, specifically product marketing, right? Messaging, brand story, that whole side of the business. I think we can bring a lot of exposure to that piece. I don't even know how we got on the subject. I started getting passionate about like Troop and the opportunity there. I'm so pumped about that. But yeah they're going to go out and raise VC.
We were talking about how hard it is for you to send them out of the nest a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think we weren't talking about that. We were talking about how hard it is to keep them front of mind. I feel like, I'm working on, if you think of the studio as like, hey, we're working on an average company for 24 months, hence the 24 and up. We really have 4 companies that are going on at a time. So it's not a lot of bifurcation of my time. And we have a team of 6 too, right? So it's like you get 1.5 people if you divide it by 4. So you're getting 1.5 co-founders. Now you're not getting 100% of my time, but you're probably getting 25% of my time.
Which is worth 10 other people.
I don't know. It's worth 10 other people. It's definitely worth whatever 25% of my time is worth. But it's like that. And then you get, another person and a half, right? Or a person and a quarter.
What is the team of 6? Are they largely engineers? Do you got
largely
some PMs?
Engineers, design, and then we have an opening now because my chief of staff is going back to the customer success space. So I have an opening. We're trying to figure out exactly what that role should be. It's a mix of helping out with operations, but it's probably also, we're trying to be. You try to think about how a business is evolving, right? And companies now, it used to be really easy to raise money. It's still relatively easy in AI if you're in San Francisco or New York. It's harder to raise money in Raleigh. It's harder to raise money in any of these secondary markets. It's harder to raise money as a first-time entrepreneur as opposed to someone who's a founder before. It's just harder to raise money, period, these days. So if we can bring someone in that maybe has more of a background as a senior associate, at a VC firm, or something like that, that might be an interesting fit to look at.
So kind of an external relations, kind of like warm up the VCs that are following the studio.
Run ops for us, help our companies with operations and getting systems set up, but at the same time, be able to help our companies raise money, right? Like right now, a lot of that falls to me. Can we offset that, and provide an additional resource there that can help out there? And then we're going to raise a little bit more money. We raised 3.5. I left $1.5 million for the studio for a couple of Pendo investors that were waiting on liquidity. They're still waiting on some liquidity. But I'd like to build the team a little bigger. Like, we were originally going to raise 5, and we knew we'd probably need more like 6 to run through a full cycle in the studio. But we're going to take it up to probably a total of 7. And raise another $3 million for the studio. So in the process of raising money at that, which is just like raising for a company, Yep. We're raising at a 9.8 pre. So the studio looks a lot like a company. It's kind of wild. And then our fund is a 2 and 20 fund, right? So it looks like a VC. So I mean, keeping 4 companies in your head is not nearly as hard. It's a lot less than VCs have to do. Like I was talking with one of the, the big VCs, and they're on like 15 to 20 boards, right? Have 15 to 20 investments. That's a lot.
There's no way to keep that.
Yeah, we're doing 4. I mean, how many tweeners now, or how many people in the tweener fund?
150.
150. Yeah, I guess that's the number you said a little while back. Yeah. So like, more power to you if you can remember all their names. It's hard, is right?
It is. Yep.
So, and that's probably the biggest struggle on my side is like, how many companies do we really want to do? Like, it's an interesting opportunity. And you think of VC funds, they always want to get bigger, right? Because there's leverage, right? If you're a good emerging manager and it's a first time fund and you're doing really well, you might have started with a $20 or a $40 million fund or even a $10 million fund. But pretty quickly, you're thinking about, hey, how can I run a $50 or $100 million fund? Because frankly, they need it to survive, right? There's not a lot of fees coming off a $10 million fund. I'm in a fortunate position where I don't need the money to survive. So I'm looking at this as all just equity upside. But you see VCs quickly getting up to the, if they're really good, it ends up being they're like $100, $200 million funds, right?
Yeah, then they have to be on 10 boards. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to do that. And then it's like, but where a studio model is inherently capable to keep small, right? In fact, it has to be small. Like an early advisor came to me and was like, hey, it's great. You have these first, at the time, 2 companies and they're doing well and they've all raised, external money. Let's leverage that so you can do 40 a year. And I'm like, whoa. That's what we don't want to do. Like, then I'm spread across. If I'm doing 40 a year and 80 in the studio at a time, what's the company getting? What does that work out to? 1.25% of my time? Then it's harder justifying, the equity piece we want. And it's also just harder adding value in general.
Your accelerator at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
You spend a lot of time in the Pittsburgh ecosystem. I think you're still a little bit active there. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
I think I was very active there when I was still living in Pittsburgh. I moved down and then the pandemic hit, so I got a lot less active, some of it out of necessity. And I think I'm going to be spending more time in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's an interesting parallel to Raleigh, right? Which we can definitely talk about.
Yeah, kind of similar. You've got good university structure. It's got a little bit of a problem of it's kind of gone from this Rust Belt kind of thing where it's gone through a down period and then I think it's on a bit of a bounce back.
Yeah.
But a lot of young people leave there. We have the opposite where a lot of young people want to stay here, and then we also have this huge influx from used to be the Northeast and then it was the Midwest and now they're coming from the West Coast. So that's kind of unique about bigger cities in the Southeast.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has a little bit of that, of boomerangs, like people have left and then come back. I don't know that the entrepreneurship community takes advantage of it as much. But similar to here, you'll find people that are like, oh, the guy running marketing for XYZ big company is actually living in Pittsburgh or in Cary, right? It's kind of crazy. There's people you don't even know about here that I'm like, oh, I didn't know he lived in Raleigh, as it turns out. Yeah, you might not even put Raleigh on his LinkedIn.
I get to meet many of them. So you're right. There is a big surface. There's an iceberg kind of situation here.
Yeah, there definitely is in both areas. And Raleigh has an interesting advantage in the climate, right? You don't move to Pittsburgh for the weather, but you move to Raleigh for the weather.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what do we need in the Triangle ecosystem as best you can tell? Now you've been here for quite a while.
Yeah, you asked this question in an email a long time back, and I was like, and didn't reply because I was thinking about this because same question gets asked of places like, Charlotte or Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, even to a lesser extent. And I think, a strong technical talent system, right, which you get from the universities and from the startup environments, right? And Raleigh definitely has that, UNC, Duke, and NC State. Sorry, I just say that. Go Heels basketball. I was always a Tar Heels fan. Scott, I'm sure all your listeners probably know that you're a big fan of the Wolfpack, right?
Yeah.
So
I think I'm not a sports person, so
yeah,
I don't really.
I am
pulled into this.
I am a sports
I think we're
guy.
fortunate to have all 3 schools here. It's
it's
brain
amazing.
factory,
I mean, great schools.
Awesome.
So like Pittsburgh has Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh and some supporting schools, right? Great computer science, great in the medical health space because of the University of Pittsburgh. Primarily computer science, I would say, on the Carnegie Mellon side. Here we have Duke, UNC, NC State, so strong supporting cast. Great, a lot of early stage support for entrepreneurs. You see that in Pittsburgh. You see that in Raleigh. There's some great programs like an accelerator in Pittsburgh called Alpha Labs. There's not exactly the same thing in Raleigh. It's probably a little bit of a gap here on that side of things.
You should start an accelerator too.
Oh my gosh,
24 and up.
I think that's
Accelerator.
I think that's more for you.
No, that's you.
Hey, in the future,
You
if
have
I
more
don't have
energy.
to do anything about it, but someone wants to run it under our brand, I'm all for it. As long as it doesn't require any of my time. But
Well,
I'm
it seems
also
like you guys have
supporting
enough learnings. There is something you could bake into an accelerator there.
we'll see how the brand expands over time, but I'm very well aware of that. Eric Boduch only scales to 70 hours a week, right? So, so there's the technical talent, right? Which I think is really important, and the university systems is an important piece.
We need an accelerator.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, I think it doesn't hurt. It helps. It helps in that environment.
And you're semi-volunteering to do it, as long as it doesn't take any of your time.
Definitely, yeah, exactly. I'm volunteering to be a cheerleader for it and help support it in however I can. That takes very little to none of my time. The second thing is like companies that do really well, right? Because going back to like, do I have the credibility or have I earned the right to start a venture studio? I would say pre-Pendo, no, right? But if you really want to be an area that has a lot of successful startups, you need other people that have done it before, either as early executives or ideally co-founders at startups, right? That are now doing another one, that have been through that growth.
We need a Pendo Mafia. You are part of the Pendo Mafia.
I am part of the Pendo Mafia. I'd love to see more. I mean, you're an investor in Hoy's company, right? Mike Hoy, one of the early sales people at Pendo, became a sales leader. So, people like that, great. We need more of that. Pittsburgh's got Duolingo and a few others, right? That are great for that. Like having people that have seen what going from 0 to 1 to 4 to 13 to 28 to, 50 something to 100 or whatever it is, like that kind of growth rate, right? That's different. It's just a different experience than growing at say 20 or 30 or 40 or 50% even a year.
This is where SaaS and some of our bigger companies never having an exit has been kind of bad for their.
Yeah, maybe. I've been here 5 years, so I've less experience about SaaS as part of the ecosystem. I think, there's probably a lot more they could do for the ecosystem if they're interested. I'm not sure, where they stand on all of that.
I think Dr. Goodnight says he doesn't like startups because they take his employees.
Yeah.
Which is true.
I can understand that. Yeah. It's for the greater good. By them taking your employees, they're bringing in additional employees in. They're growing companies that you can then take their employees. Like growing the overall, size of the market, I would argue is better for SaaS than worrying about, losing an employee here or there, because now Pendo employs how many hundreds in Raleigh, Bandwidth, Red Hat, all those companies.
We'll have you and Dr. Goodnight. You guys can hash it out. That'll be a fun pod.
I've never met him. Would love to meet him sometime. So if he listens to your podcast, my email's eric@24andup.com. You can email me. I'd love to chat with him.
We'll see how it.
They built an amazing company over there, right? Amazing company.
It's amazing.
Umstead's amazing. Like they've done some amazing things. I even got to see his rock exhibit. Like he's got a mineral and cool like rare rock exhibit. I was over there one point and one of their execs took me through there. That was amazing. Like, I mean, he's got some amazing stories. I'd love to talk to him sometime. I think there's that piece. So we talked about like, hey, we need technical talent. We have that here. We need more of the Pendos of the world in these areas that are spinning off people that have seen that growth rate, right? That have been through that. And it's important that, as one of my San Francisco, I lived in San Francisco for 6.5 years. So as one of the San Francisco VCs told us, they can't be cogs in the wheel, right? Like, you don't want the people that are like mid-level managers at Meta or whatever, and they might be great, who knows? But they're cogs in the wheel. They're not the wheel. They're not the one who built the wheel, right? Like, so you need people that have been through that kind of experience. And then you need VCs that have funded those kind of things, because funding those is different too, right? And I think that's an area where Raleigh and Pittsburgh both are pretty weak, right? Of like VCs that want to get in an idea level. And one of the Red Point partners described themselves as a YOLO firm, but it's that kind of thing. Like, hey, are you going to invest in the next Pendo, the next Duolingo, the next Salesforce, the next Airbnb? I mean, how many people turn down Airbnb? A huge number of early VCs, right? Are you going to invest in those at the idea level, or are they going to be done by outside capital? And having capital that has an office here, that's involved here, is so important, right? Because, when you have fundraising downturns, the first thing they do is start saying, I'm going to do all my early stage deals in my backyard, right? And even for Pendo, with 4 pretty experienced co-founders, it was hard raising money in Raleigh. right? I mean, we were turned down by Raleigh firms in the get-go.
Yeah. Only Idea Lab through some
Idea Fund as like a smaller investor. And at that point, we were backed by Core and Contour, right? New York and DC. Even my first 2 studio companies, both of them, ended up being funded by San Francisco, primarily San Francisco. The third one remains to be seen. I've been trying to get that done with a local firm, So I'd love to build some of that. Like, who's going to bet on the next Pendo? Who wants to build that kind of firm? And we'll see. Like, there's opportunity. I mean, we'll see where Tim, takes co-founders, right? There's an opportunity for them to be really aggressive about that sort of stuff.
Well, part of the challenge is, as those guys have been successful and gotten up to that 50-80 round, which is great, in fund size, they're not writing the smaller checks. So that
but they don't
250 and
necessarily
500
need to be smaller checks. Like our early investments, I mean, CRV did Revcast $2+ million check, right?
Yeah, for you guys.
Yeah.
But for people that aren't in a venture studio that are
but early,
like
I would argue even for early stage
the
employees.
Michael Hoys of the world, they need that early stage check that has kind of left the area.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see that early stage check be bigger, even in the Hoys of the world. Like that, hey, let's write that $2 to $3 million first check into a company and really let them build, as opposed to like, hey, we'll give you a $250 or a $500,000 check and you're going to be able to not do as much as someone else you're competing with in the Valley or Boston can do, right?
Yeah.
And really,
that's not the
mindset.
Right. Is like give pre-revenue companies
but I think,
$2 or $3 million.
Going back to that story, right? We have this technical talent here that's solid. We're starting to have an environment in Raleigh where we have companies that have seen that fast growth, and now we need that VC community that wants to be those YOLO funds, that wants to has aspirations to be the next, Redpoint or Sequoia or Andreessen or, CRV or Bessemer or Battery, you name it, of those famous, how do you build a firm like that? And I think there's an opportunity to have one of those in Raleigh, whether it's a new firm or one of the existing firm takes a different approach. And it's probably, maybe that firm starts as a $100 million firm, but it's probably a $100+ million firm, right? And when you talk to people in successful areas, that's one of the areas that they say the Raleighs, the Pittsburghs, the Charlottes are missing, is that firm that's going to bet on those generational sized companies, right?
Yeah, like the Austin Ventures that no longer is, but for a long time they were there.
Yeah.
Plant flex.
Pittsburgh has the same thing. Duolingo got funded outside. It was a founder, similar to the Pendo story, that had some success before. And, first money, I think, was Union Square, right out of New York, right? Outside. You can't miss those deals in your hometown, and you might have to pay a little more for those deals. You might have to get involved earlier, but in the early stage deals, you're betting on a large part on the jockey and the system, right? You're betting on the founders. So we need that. I mean, I was talking with, someone in Indianapolis claiming that Indianapolis is doing so well because it has that, right? It has that component. I mean, High Alpha did a lot there. Scott Dorsey, the whole team there, amazing people.
He's the exact target guy, right?
Yeah, exact target guy. Really, similar environment. Started with a venture studio and then grew it up into a whole, what I would describe as a financial conglomerate now, like a big area.
Is that something you want to try to do?
Whew, that's a loaded question, Scott.
Sounds like you're volunteering again.
Yeah, no, I mean,
now you're gonna do an accelerator and you're gonna build a giant financial.
No, there's one area where I'd agree with Jason Kaplan. You only can do so much. I mean, I would love to support someone and be involved in a great VC fund that wants to be the fund that's gonna, fund the next Pendos or the next Duolingos or, the next Bandwidths or Red Hats or what have you, right? I'd love to be involved in that. I'd love my studio even potentially to be a piece of that, right? They get our funding through something like that. I don't know that I have the time to drive that. I have the time to be involved, but it needs someone this goes back to I think it needs someone that has that strong operational background, that strong experience, someone that's built companies before, someone like you, or bring someone into the area, right?
Maybe Todd could do this after he's done. You got to start working on Todd.
I think Todd's going to go into politics. So Todd's always had a political bent. Can you see Governor Todd Olson? Who knows? Down the line. We're not outing Todd as a political career yet, but
pure speculation.
Governor Todd Olson would be kind of cool, or Senator Todd Olson, or Vice President Todd Olson under the, Scott's already getting me now to run for president, so it could be Vice President Todd Olson in the Boduch, ticket. No, I think that's the last job. I would have all the jobs. That'll be way, way down the list. More power to the politicians that are out there. But I think Todd would be amazing, in that kind of environment.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think it's important, we've talked about VCs, right? And we've talked about technical talent. We've talked about people that have had the experience growing companies, and entrepreneurs are like, see, none of this is my fault. It's the area. If I don't, but entrepreneurs have a responsibility too. And their responsibility is to buy from other entrepreneurs. And there's a tendency for entrepreneurs, especially in some of the more technical towns like Pittsburgh and Raleigh, to build stuff, right? Like, instead of buying from XYZ startup, we're going to build that ourselves. It's not going to be as much, and we'll throw some in. That's horrible, both for their companies, I would argue, but also for the area. One of the great things about San Francisco, and you can take YC as an example, is they buy from other startups. Their first $1 million of revenue in a lot of YC startups is coming from other startups. And there's pluses and minuses to it. It might be discounted in some ways when VCs look at it and say, oh, most of your customers are startups, but it's not discounted 100%. It's probably discounted like 10, 15. So entrepreneurs have a responsibility here. If they really want to make it easier for themselves to raise money and the people coming after them to raise money, to buy from other startups that can solve their problems and work with them to build the products that fit their needs, be those early design customers, write the checks, get involved, Yep. I think it's important. There's a company in Cycle that I just met with right before this morning. And I'm like, they have a really cool product. I'm going to figure out how to use them at some of our studio companies, right? And it's 2 co-founders and an outsourced team in the Ukraine, right? I don't even think they're paying themselves right now. But they've bootstrapped themselves to this product, and now they're going to go. And they have a cool product around sales coaching and contact management that would be pretty awesome. So we need to go out of our way as companies, as entrepreneurs, as startups themselves, to buy from other entrepreneurs. So some of the responsibility for making this area successful falls to the startups themselves, and building an environment that's more friendly for startups to get funded, for startups to hire people that have done it before, for startups to have the technical talent. And part of that is buying from other startups.
Gotcha. All right. So we need an accelerator. We need a $100 million fund. We need some of these big companies to be successful and shed off more
I think we have a lot of that. I do think we have a lot of that.
And we need to buy from each other.
I think we could use like a really strong early stage VC that wants to invest in people like, the CEO of Jupiter One, right? You guys got in a tweener. Like, I'm not going to pre-announce anything. I have no idea where he is, but people know in town he's doing something, right? Like, those are the deals that have to get done by that VC that would be here, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be every single one of them. There might be reasons that I'm not saying do every single deal that, a past entrepreneur has come up with, but, if they're successful and they're not funded by it, it just looks bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The Duolingo's not getting funded by a Pittsburgh VC look bad, similar things.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Eric. That's a good formula. That's your platform for being mayor of Entrepreneurville.
Thanks, Scott. I heard you're mayor of Entrepreneurville, and you're not giving up that position anytime soon. I've seconded your nomination. It's a lifetime award. You can't leave.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on the podcast and for sharing all your stories and for what you're doing to continue to contribute to the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Always willing to help.
Awesome.
Thanks, Scott. Bye.
For more tweener content, check out the Triangle Tweener Time Substack at tweener.substack.com. For more tweener content, check out tweenertimes.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Triangle Tweener Talks.